I was made to smile recently by the man who became Britain's oldest citizen. I missed his name, but he was 112. And when he was asked what the secret was of his long life, he wryly replied, avoiding dying. Because we're living through a heightened time of doing just what that elderly man advised, avoiding dying. In the last analysis, we're in a world doing that. And it sounds a bit stark, but I think it's a fair description. Part of the trouble is that thanks to modern medicine, a reliable food supply and prosperity, our Western culture has come to think that death is unusual or a nasty surprise of some sort. Previous generations, and sadly still too many other parts of the world, knew only too well the reality of children dying young, of common diseases proving fatal, and of life expectancy being short. Death is a reality for all of us. Some of you might remember the journalist Malcolm Muggeridge, who famously described death as the ultimate statistic. 1 in 1 people dies. But even so, there's still something in me, and I'm sure in you, that somehow balks at the idea that death is normal. And I think the Bible gives us some good reasons for that feeling. You see, death was never God's original intention for the human race. It only entered into the story after Adam and Eve decided to turn their back on God, and it came about as a result of their declaration of independence from him. That's what sin is. And St. Paul described death as the last enemy, and we find Jesus weeping at the grave of his friend Lazarus. Death isn't a good thing. And one of the things that this lockdown has emphasised is that it is relationships that are the things that really matter for us as human beings. And because death finally breaks relationship, that makes it the final enemy. And that's why the dreadful situation of people dying of COVID-19 and not being able to be surrounded by those they love is so difficult. We may not be able to avoid death, but there are good and much less good ways of facing it and dealing with it. But when St. Paul talks about death as the last enemy, he's doing it while he thinks about the resurrection of Jesus and of God's answer to the problem that death causes us. Jesus' death on the cross and the demonstration of his victory over death by his resurrection is an undoing of what went wrong in the Garden of Eden at the beginning. And the key is faith. Faith in Jesus risen from the dead. For death to be transformed from a full stop into a gateway requires a decision by each of us to reverse the damage done by Adam and Eve. The choice is for us to turn to Jesus as the Son of God and let him take the driving seat in our lives. Then there is hope, because death is not the end, but the beginning of a glorious and wonderful eternity. Death is difficult, but it's a reality we need to squarely face up to in order to live well, to live rightly, and to live with hope. When St. Paul writes about it in 1 Corinthians 15, he says this: death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Thanks be to God. He gives us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. If you need to talk, do get in touch with me or with someone else you trust. God bless you for today.